Welcome to the Depth Dialogues podcast,
where we explore how depth psychology is applied to tackle contemporary social issues.
I'm Kirk Schneider.
And I'm Tyler Gamlin. Today we are privileged to host a true luminary, Dr. Bill Doherty, whose transformative work has left an indelible mark on countless lives. I first became aware of Bill's remarkable contributions through Kirk and his groundbreaking work on the experiential democracy dialogue. Bill's leadership of the Minnesota Couples on the Brink project has illuminated the complexities of relationships on the edge, offering hope and healing to those teetering on the brink of separation. As a practicing marriage and family therapist, Bill's insights have guided countless individuals and couples towards healthier and more fulfilling connections. But Bill's impact extends far beyond the therapy room. He co-founded the Doherty Relationship Institute, a hub of innovation in relationship counseling. His commitment to bridging political divides through initiatives like the Citizen Professional Center and as a co-founder of Braver Angels demonstrates his dedication to healing not only personal relationships, but also societal ones. Bill's contributions to the field are nothing short of legendary, with an impressive 17 books to his name and a slew of prestigious awards, including the American Family Therapy Academy's Lifetime Achievement Award. Now, without further ado, I'm thrilled to pass the mic over to Kirk, whose insightful dialogue with Bill Doherty promises to enlighten and inspire.
Thanks so much, Tyler. And Bill, I just want to express my deepest appreciation to you for appearing with us for our debut podcast. And it's only fitting that you are our guest today. So by way of disclosure, I want to say just a few things about my background with you, that I've been very privileged to have been a trained moderator for Braver Angels for several years, basically 2016 through 2020. I was particularly active. I'm still a very strong supporter and member of Braver Angels. And I just think the world of your efforts and our efforts in regard to Braver Angels. I also hope that we can delve into some areas of contrast and comparison with our mission here as the core of Depth Healers. I'm very curious to hear more of your input on how we may dovetail, work together, possibly partner in some ways, and also what you're doing that may be different in terms of the Braver Angels work. So I'd like to start off just with a very brief summary, if you would, as to what Braver Angels is and what your impact is currently, given these very trying times, these very polarized times.
Yeah. Well, let me just say I'm happy to be joining you, and that wonderful introduction. You know, I'm from Minnesota, so we like the introductions to be. Bill has been an above average contributor for his entire career. So anything more than that, you know, kind of like, whoa, okay. But thank you. That was very, very gracious. So Braver Angels, got started on a happenstance, really, with a few of us deciding after the 2016 election we were going to bring 10 Hillary Clinton voters and 10 Donald Trump voters together for 13 hours over a weekend in Southwest Ohio. And I designed and facilitated that. It was extremely powerful, and we decided to keep going. And so people ask, well, what was the big strategic plan? That was the strategic plan: do one, and then keep going. And so our mission evolved to be, we call ourselves a group of reds and blues. So conservatives and liberals. Our leadership is always half red, half blue. Building relationships of trust between us and trying to heal, transcend the toxic partisan divide in the country, or to depolarize America when I want to be grandiose about it. And so you mentioned my background in couples therapy. We're like a couple divided, but divorce is not possible for the country because you can't have one group, everybody move to Canada. So we have to figure out a way to get along and lead this country together.
Thanks, Bill. I'm just wondering if you could say a few words about where you feel Braver Angels is at now in terms of impacting our.
Yeah. Well, in terms of just workshops, we're several thousand along from that first one. We have a membership, 12,000 members around the country, several hundred trained moderators. And we've attracted some academics who are studying our workshops, and they do in fact do have an effect on people's attitudes towards the political other in a positive direction. So we've established that, and we're continuing to move it there. We also have been attracting more elected officials, and so we have something we call Braver Politics, and we are doing trainings. One of them is called Managing Difficult Conversations with Constituents. Another is called Managing Difficult Conversations with Colleagues. And so we're doing these with local elected officials, with county administrators, school boards, a variety of local elected officials, and also incrementally with state legislators. So we've done workshops for several states, one of which has actually established its own Braver Angels Caucus. And we've done a handful of workshops with members of Congress. So that's been a kind of a new area for us. And what I want to say about that is these elected officials are not happy. They are not happy. They are living in contentious times. They're getting it from their left and the right, from below and above. They're getting it everywhere. And so they have reached out to us. And then the last thing I'll say about what's sort of a growing edge is groups who have been through our workshops together and have formed local chapters, taking some action steps together. And it could just be a town is divided about a small town in Vermont, divided about what to do with that intersection, or a town in California with what their homeless policy was going to be. And so a kind of growing edge is how to take local civic action. So overall, it's very exciting. It's a very exciting time, and lots of stuff coming our way.
Bill, you mentioned the workshops with Congress. Can you talk a little bit more about that? And does that differ from the usual format for Braver Angels?
Yeah, so we have various workshops, some of which are what we call red-blue workshops, where we bring people together, 8 reds, 8 blues, and there's an element in that of people both celebrating what's good about their political side and also being humble about limitations and downsides. When we work with members of Congress, we can't ask them to talk about the tremendous limitations of their own side. They live in an atmosphere where they can't possibly have enough trust for that. And so what we've done just 3 times, so I don't want to exaggerate this, but 3 times with members of the Problem Solvers Caucus. So if anybody wants to feel a little hope about Congress, the Problem Solvers Caucus is 30 Republicans, 30 Democrats who meet every week for a meal, and they try to work on some bipartisan legislation and build relationships. So they have invited us in. And so what we've done with them is an exercise we call life experience exercise. And that is that in small groups, everybody gets 5 uninterrupted minutes to answer this question. What life experiences have influenced your values and beliefs about public policy and public service? What life experiences have influenced your values and beliefs about public policy and public service? And we asked them to go deeper than when I was in junior high and I was elected president of my class, I knew I wanted, and so, and they do. And they tell powerful stories, mostly about family, about inspiration, about loss, about sometimes serious dysfunction, inspiration, and they go around in the old talking stick format. You don't have to build on what somebody said. You just tell your story, and it's been extremely powerful. And I want to share after one of them what a member of Congress said, who had introduced himself as a crusty, deep conservative. Okay, so I'm as conservative as the day is long, but I believe in pragmatism and working across the aisle. And he told a very powerful story about growing up in poverty, and across the table from him was somebody who had lost family members in the Holocaust. Well, at the end, when we said, what are you taking with you from this? He said, what I'm taking with me is you can't fight somebody in the same way when you know their heart. You can't fight somebody in the same way when you know their heart. So that's the kind of thing we do with officials like that.
And is it safe to say that sharing those stories, having that 5-minute space, is to show that, despite our differences here, we do have common background?
Yes, a common shared humanity.
Yeah.
We have sources, everyone has sources of pain in their life, and everybody has sources of inspiration in their life. And then they feel a connection. We've done this several times with members of the New Hampshire legislature, and I remember one of them saying, when she's sitting across a committee table with somebody who's annoying her by their policy views, she knows them as a person better. She knows something about their motivations that helps her stay in relationship.
So speaking of this, the importance of person-to-person contact, I'd like to explore with you a little more about how your mission with Braver Angels may or may not dovetail with what we're about with Core of Depth Healers. Our focus is on providing examples to people of experts who especially work from what we might call a depth perspective. And by depth, I mean helping people to feel heard and seen, and getting at the roots of their problem, really attempting to get at the nub of the issue, and also including themes, issues that may be implicit, not necessarily explicit, but maybe we call subconscious to some degree, and evoking that, so that people have more full sense of each other as human beings, as opposed to just labels or stereotypes. And our mission is quite broad. We base it on what we call promoting emotionally restorative relationships, as I was just defining before. I'm wondering how Braver Angels may dovetail with that general mission, with that broad mission. And we focus it on providing bridge building dialogues, but also promotion of, say, longer term in-depth therapy, especially in underserved communities, supporting life coaching, mentoring. Do you have thoughts about the breadth of that mission, how we may even, mesh together in terms of that?
Yeah. Well, what strikes me is that we're those transformative relationships tend to occur in Braver Angels is not at our basic workshops. Those are 3 hours, 7 hours is the longest. But when people stay with it and they join local alliances or chapters, and they begin to form what we call civic friendships, okay, where you're working together for the sake of your community and your country, and get to know each other in more depth, and see the political differences as just one piece. And so it's the relationships across the political divide. It's easier to form relationships to make the world better with people who agree with you on almost everything. But to be, Abraham Lincoln talked about the team of rivals, the name of one of his biographies, team of rivals. He brought together a cabinet of people who were quite different from each other. Right. And so we like to talk about the diversity these days. Ideological diversity, political diversity is harder in many ways than racial and other sorts of diversities. So that's where I think some of those relationships. In fact, at a meeting just yesterday, where we're planning our next convention, one of our leaders said, "This being in public at our conventions, and you're wearing a red or a blue lanyard, and you can also wear a yellow lanyard if you're in the middle, but red or blue, you are publicly declaring your a core value. We're not just talking about who you vote for, but something core to your identity with other people who you can choose to seek out." So for me, the favorite moments there are we always do a college campus, so it's the cafeteria. And then I see you with a lanyard that's different from mine. And we both know we don't have to suss out, if I mention Trump, do you groan or do you light up? No, we have that difference. And so it's the foundation post-workshop for developing relationships that have some depth. That's my immediate reaction to what you said.
Yeah. And it's a beautiful reflection in my view of a move toward a more complete or deeper democratic republic, if you will.
Yes.
We take a broad view. So on that point, I often feel like these bridge building engagements with folks is a race against time. My fear is that the vicious cycle of polarization, keeps getting fueled by political rhetoric, social media, media in general that tries to sensationalize for often profit-making reasons. And I guess I'm wondering, from your standpoint, and given all these struggles and efforts that you've made to promote bridge building in our country, do you think we got a decent shot at having a mass movement or an impact on the critical masses of the country, so that the extremes are more and more marginalized, and people come to more of a kind of civil engagement with one another? What kind of chance do you feel we have right now, or are we like little ants, climbing up a mountain?
Well, I like to say that I inherited the optimistic Irish genes, not the depressive ones. So I am congenitally an optimist. And in some ways, so two reflections. Meta one is that we're in a particularly bad patch. And there's a kind of a fever, our country's in a fever of polarization. We will, may not be in our lifetimes, but we will move to a different place. We had a civil war. And what I'm committed to is, as these events play out, I'm committed to the healing process that can be in place when we move to a different time. And in fact, as I've reflected on the Civil War, the abolitionist movement and the Civil War, the abolitionists were successful, slaves were freed, and then the abolitionists went home. And we did not heal as a country.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't want to make that mistake again. I don't want that somebody's at least favorite politician ends up in prison, and then we move on, and we just and so how do we heal? And it's up to us. So last week I came across a quote. I'm going to quote St. Augustine for the first time in my life. Okay, but he wrote one time that we like to complain about living in dark times. And then this is the quote, but we are the times. As we go, so go the times. We are the times. And polarization isn't just out there, it's in our hearts. And it's between us. And that's what we have to work on.
What a powerful quote. Yeah.
It's very powerful. What I'm hearing is that to some degree, you and hopefully we are providing tools for people as we emerge from these times.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, addressing the present times for sure, to the degree we can,
Yes.
but also for the future, so that we have resources to enhance what we're creating now.
Yes.
And also looking to ourselves, beginning with our own being and our own polarization, inner polarizations.
Exactly.
So that we can have more of a healing space, working with others as well. Yeah.
Bill, I'm so interested in your background as a marriage and family therapist and how that influences your work that you're doing with Braver Angels. And you've been quoted as saying, "We are a family, this country of ours, with more than 330 million people. I see it as my own form of duty and patriotism to help folks in our country talk to each other. When that happens, then real relationships and understanding can follow." I'm wondering if you can elaborate on that and your plans for achieving this, especially moving into another election cycle.
Well, my first thing is, hey, did I write that? That sounded pretty good. You know, whenever anybody quotes me, I'm always hoping I still believe it. You know, when you've had a long career.
Like, when did I say that?
Did I say that in 1978? I don't believe that anymore. So thank you for quoting something I still hold dear. So I want to respond maybe even more narrowly than you may have been asking. About my background as a marriage and family therapist, particularly as a couples therapist, and how that's been important to me in helping to shape Braver Angels. You know, I've been the main developers of our workshops and so on, and that is, as a couple therapist, I can't be helpful unless I get both people's perspectives, both people's feelings, both people's worlds, and how they communicate. And can hold both of those perspectives at the same time, with equal regard for and validation for both people, and that's what I've tried to do with the red-blue divide and the polarization, and that is, even though, and this is harder now because I have my own political views. You know, I vote. And so that's what it's different from a couple, because I don't actually, you know, I always say to them, I don't get a vote in your relationship, you know. But I do have a vote nationally. But I've tried to hold myself to the discipline of compassionate understanding of people who are different from me politically and differ from one another politically, and resisting the temptation that I don't think we're immune to as therapists at all when we get into the public space, of saying there are good guys and bad guys. There are smart people and dumb people. There are enlightened people and duped people. And I happen to be, isn't that fortunate, on the enlightened side. And so I want to tell you a little story, and then to finish up my answer, I had a flashback to one of the early workshops I did. It was a skills for bridging the divide workshop. It was back in Maryland, and there were about 13 therapists in the room. I happened to know that because some colleagues invited their friends, and there was a whole bunch of other people. And at the end of the workshop, and these were really basic skills for, listening skills and iMessages, this stuff we know. And I asked people what they were taking with them. And a therapist raised her hand and said, well, the skills are ones I know, but I never thought to apply them to political differences.
Yeah, that's fascinating that it's overlooked. And it's such a basic premise, communicating, listening, not imposing your views, because that doesn't matter in the therapy space, right? I don't, whether the couple stays together or not, it's not going to change how I sleep at night, but the job is not related to that, right?
Right.
Yeah. And finding that goal to say, well, why are we here? What do we want to accomplish? And it usually starts with communication, right? Isn't that commonly what a couple say? We are having an issue communicating. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, it seems to me that we as therapists or as healers should be particularly well versed in providing spaces for people to work with contrasts and contradictions, right? And hopefully we are skilled at doing that ourselves to a great extent, because obviously we get activated, like you were saying before, Bill. It's so easy to go holier than thou, right? Us, them. For therapists as well. I mean, I give workshops to a number of therapists in the country, and we see it all the time when we see tragically some rifts among therapists that don't square with our training. So that's where I'm particularly strong on trying to appeal to the therapeutic and the healing community to use the skills you have, use the luxury that you have that many people don't have, of being able to hold these contrasts and contradictions within ourselves and with others, and promote that. So speaking of that, actually, I'm wondering how relevant you feel bridge building dialogues like Braver Angels or Experiential Democracy Dialogue or Starts With Us are the closer we get to zones of danger. Israel, Palestine, Ukraine. Do you feel that our principles are operative there, are relevant, especially the closer you get within what I call the radius of immediate danger, or are all bets off as you get closer to that radius?
Yeah, so I would say we need this even more the closer we get to the radius of danger. And so in Braver Angels, what we have done with the Israeli-Palestinian issue is we have created a modification of our one-to-one. We have a one-to-one conversation process that is structured. It's not facilitated, and we've done a couple thousand of these red, blue, white person, person of color. We've done various combinations. And so we've modified this for the Israeli-Palestinian issue. And so that's one of the ways that we're approaching this, is not to start out with some big town hall, because the level of reactivity for completely understandable reasons is very high. And so you get a big group together and it's likely to be terrible. And we have a debate process, parliamentary style debate, that's really quite fun, but it's kind of cognitive, right? And so that's not what this is for. So we kind of went through what are some things we have that might be applicable. And so we started out with the one-to-one. And there's two versions of that. There are two types of pairs. One is somebody who leans more towards the Israeli cause and somebody who leans more towards the Palestinian cause. And then the other is for two Jewish people who both support Israel, but who disagree profoundly about Israeli policy. And so those are, and maybe someday we'll develop one for two Palestinians who disagree, but those are the two we have now. And I had the privilege, when we pilot these one-to-ones, we ask people to agree to have them recorded so that I can look at them and see if they're working well. It was really quite profound to see two people following. There's a script here, and part of the script is it begins with your story. How it begins with the life experiences. What life experiences do you bring to this? And then each person gets 4 minutes uninterrupted, and then at the end of that, the two-part question is, what did you learn about how the other person's experience is related to this? And did you say anything in common? So we're always asking, listen, what did you learn about how they see the world? Did you see anything in common? And working our way through that. And just watching those really quite profound. I'll just give one example. A young woman who's a graduate student in peace studies. She's from Colombia, and she was paired up with a middle-aged Jewish woman from a different part of the country who is also a therapist. And one of the things the young woman said at the end from Colombia, that she had never actually talked to somebody, a Jewish person, who had experienced anti-Semitism. And the Jewish woman herself, she's been to Israel a lot, and she's got friends there. She's critical of some of the government policy. But the young woman said she had never, so for her, Jews were kind of an invulnerable, powerful group. And she had never actually met somebody who personally had suffered and whose relative has suffered. Whoa.
Yeah.
So we're doing that. And then we also we have something called a common ground workshops, where we bring people together around a particular issue. And so we've done 2 of those so far, and they're hard. But we're going to keep at it and see if we have to, but those are 8 and 8. And the purpose is to come up with some agreements about how to move forward. So that's what we've been doing on that. And so we don't want to walk away from any major issue, but we want to be careful about what tools we have that can potentially make a contribution.
What a powerful story. And what came to mind when you were talking about this was often, we fear the other, or fill in the blank about what the narrative is when we don't know their background. And I hear a theme coming up that we're talking about these lived experiences that we have in common, but we often just don't know about because it's not said. And so I wonder how then, to maybe dismantle that, maybe sharing our story is something that is going to help apply this change. Because if we know more about the other, I submit that we would fear a lot less, right?
Completely agree.
Like what you said earlier, I forget the exact wording, but it just, yeah, it just comes back to knowing the story. There was a quote that you had mentioned and in the beginning, and it
Well,
relates
one
to
of I'll do another line of mine, that behind every passionate political belief is a story.
yeah.
Okay. If so I have, my extended family, I have a relative who is a retired law enforcement person. He worked for the federal law enforcement, and he's rabidly against affirmative action. And I decided one day to try to get his story.
Mm-hmm.
And whether his story is accurate or not, who knows? But he felt that there was a time in his career that he was assigned a partner in a dangerous situation based on affirmative action, who was not competent, and it could have cost him his life. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I get
Yeah.
that. Now, whether that was accurate or not, of course, I can't say. But okay, it isn't just I'm going to pick that policy and be against it. What's the story behind it? And can I listen to the story and understand?
Yeah.
Personal.
It's the schemas that we have, and these emotionally restorative relationships, I think, are one of the ways through. Kirk, were you going to say something?
Well, on this point of personal context
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to rhetoric,
Mm-hmm.
or media fueled reactivity and perceptions, so important. And we all know how much it changes the whole tenor of the relationship when people are face to face with each other in safe and structured settings. Uh, so on that point, also, I'm wondering if you could elaborate a bit about uh, what role you see for what I might call the experiential dimension of person-to-person contact in these dialogues, meaning an emphasis more on the immediate, the affective or emotional, the embodied, kinesthetic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, some of the kinds of work that we do in depth therapy, providing a working space for the person uh, to connect or go a little deeper than the words that are exchanged,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
giving them some time to be with the feeling that comes up. Let's say if somebody's
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
beginning to tear up or has a degree of anger, what is your criterion for enabling that or allowing that in your sessions, as distinct from, maybe we better reserve that for a more private therapeutic setting?
Yeah, it's a really important question, and it's and it helps me clarify our zone, our lane, because the workshops that we do and the activities we do are designed specifically and deliberately for a wide range of moderators slash facilitators, most of whom are not therapists. Some of them are from the business world, or they come from their religious world, or just they're teachers. And so we design activities for these frontline workshops of people coming in off the street, right? That are safe, and that so nobody gets overexposed. And that can be done by people with modest group facilitation skills. I think there is room for more depth. Let me tell you, a project that I got started at the same time as Braver Angels is called Police and Black Men Project. And that's a group of police officers, black and white, and black men from Minneapolis, who have been meeting for 7 years. Some folks left, some people came in, but this group has been at it. And from time to time, there is great depth where people are in crisis. People have had a terrible experience, and the group can hold them. And there's, so I think those are possible with trust and with a, trained therapist slash facilitator. So I welcome that. I want to say one other thing though, Kirk, and this is about the red-blue thing, because as a generalization, I think what I'm going to say is true, that blues or liberals tend to gravitate more towards those more in-depth experiences as powerful and as helpful on their own. And reds less so, and they wonder what's the useful thing that's going to come out of it. And I know I'm overgeneralizing, but I think it's a valid generalization. And so can you see, when we started these things, the last thing we wanted to do was to have a therapeutic tone in the workshop. It's hard enough to recruit reds to a skills for disagreeing better workshop than something that was more in depth. Having said that, I really welcome, and I know, I mean, I watched, Kirk, your session with a police officer at a therapist conference. I'll never forget that interview. Okay, because you could go deeper there, and so I welcome it. It's just that for Braver Angels, I think we sort of have our zone.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. And I guess my own criterion is basically enable depth, enable organic responsiveness, conservative or liberal, because sometimes it just comes up organically, as you know, as long as people adhere to the ground rules.
Right.
That's the
That's
guardrail.
right.
If they start accusing each other or, presuming things or imposing views on the other, then, time to mediate seems to me.
Yeah. And part of it is that a trained therapist, and by the way, not all therapists, because we don't necessarily teach good group skills anymore. Right. But therapists who have that wherewithal can help something come out of that is really quite powerful. It's just that not everybody can do that. And if you don't have somebody in the space, then it can go off the rails.
Very true. Yeah. I realize we're at the 40-minute mark, but Tyler, do you have a further question or?
Yeah, I have another question for Bill. What advice do you have for individuals who are struggling with to engage in productive conversations with like family members or loved ones about differing political views? It's kind of I see that as an intersection between some of the work that you do. So I'm wondering what you would offer there.
Well, I would suggest they do our online course, Families and Politics.
Yeah.
Because this is actually, it's one of my favorite things that I developed, because my family therapy comes out here. But just briefly, I would urge them to let go of trying to get family members to change their mind about politics or ideology that's important. Let go. Secondly, to tell yourself that the political views of your family members and loved ones and who they vote for should not determine my emotional equilibrium. We are separate people.
Yeah.
And a lot of what happens in families is I can't believe that you would.
Yeah.
You are part of me. You're a parent. You're my sibling. My spouse even. And then I get agitated because of your political views. And that is a lack of, to use a kind of a family system, to a lack of differentiation of self. And so there's the first work to do is internal. I can't control my family members, and how they view the world does not have to determine my level of emotional equilibrium. And then thirdly is to be aware that family disputes among adults around politics are often reflections of childhood stuff. Who's the favorite kid? Who stayed the liberal, the conservative, and who strayed from it?
Yeah.
So there's all those family dynamics that get played out over Donald Trump or Joe Biden or whatever.
Mhm.
So being aware of all of that, can allow me to use some skills that I know how to use to ask questions and engage. And so what I always do again, and I practice this with some of my relatives, is how to get into the conversation. So with my relative from another part of the country, the guy who's so against affirmative action, whenever we get together a few times a year, my opener line is, so what are people saying in your part of the world about
Mhm.
blah, blah, blah,
Mhm.
okay, about Trump, about whatever. It's my opener. And
Yeah.
he's happy to educate me about what people in his world are saying. And then he slips in his ideas, and then I find something I can agree with.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
It's usually something I agree with, like immigration is a mess. Okay.
Mhm.
And then we are connected.
Yeah.
Okay. He's told me some stories. I've agreed with something. We're in.
And what's great about that approach that I want to point out is that it doesn't start off accusatory or charged. It's just, what are people in your area, discussing,
Yeah.
as opposed to, some heated kind of like, are you still Republican? That kind of.
Yeah.
And then
Right.
you're
Exactly.
on the defense. You're like, yeah, that's my view, but apparently, clearly it's not okay with you.
Right.
Who would want to
Exactly.
engage in that
Who would want
conversation?
to engage in
Yeah.
that? That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. We also have some fun in that workshop, talking about different family roles, like the gladiator.
Hmm.
The gladiator is there to correct everybody. The defender who hangs out and waits for you to say the wrong thing, and then they go out, they defend whatever. Um, and then my favorite is the sniper, the passive aggressive one who just sort of. So what's our family feminist socialists think about that?
Uh-huh.
And family members just want to tear their eyes out, but you have now fallen into the trap, right?
Yeah.
And so we actually teach people to respond to that kind of thing with humor, with tossing it back on them. Was there a point you wanted to make? In other
Hmm.
words, don't get activated
Hmm.
by
Yeah.
somebody. And the last thing I'll say is that when we teach these skills, if somebody's had a steam up and you're trying to listen and so on, before you express your view, there's a skill that has been around that I created a name for called a pivot. And that is to say, well, I've had some thoughts about that. You kind of interested in me mentioning my thought.
Hmm.
Wait till you get a real yes to that before you share your view.
Hmm.
If the gladiator just rides over that and keeps going, do not share your view.
Yeah.
I'm not going to share my view with somebody who's sending me every possible signal they're not open to it.
Yeah.
If
I
I'm
got
in a positive, kindly mood, I'll listen to them some more, or
Hmm.
I'll exit the conversation. But I'm not going to get into it with somebody who is who's not indicating that they're open to it. So part of what we teach is some self-protective
Yes.
skills as well.
Yeah.
I just want to say that I think you illustrate the differentiation beautifully in the couples work that we've highlighted at Core of Depth Healers as well.
Hmm.
It's available. Um, yeah, that whole problem of conflation too, of bringing one reaction or idea and imposing it on everything and everyone else,
Hmm.
rather than, like you say, recognize that my love for my partner has a really major place in my relationship, and I'm totally uh, pushing that over
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
for this ideological reaction.
Yes,
But the skill is creating a working space for it. Yeah.
that's right.
So, well, I think we've come to some closing moments of our engagement here, which has been wonderful.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, Bill, if you have any concluding thoughts that you'd like to convey about Braver Angels, or where we are in our conflicting world right now, that you'd like to convey to
Yeah,
folks.
I guess I'd just like to repeat that we are the times. And
Mhm.
as we go, so go the times. and that we all, in our own personal worlds as well as our professional worlds, can either be bridge builders or bridge burners. And the bridge burners have the day now. And rather than just wring my hands or our hands about the people at the top, we can ourselves individually, personally, and in our professional world be bridge builders.
Beautiful. Yeah, I'm on board with that.
And thank you for inviting me. This is great
This has
fun.
been a wonderful conversation. Bill, thank you so much for giving your morning to us and sharing this space with us, and being the first guest on the Depth Dialogues podcast.
All right, I'm honored, and it's been a joy.
I feel like you embodied that beautifully because we went in depth.
Yes, we sure
There we
did.
go. There
We
we go.
achieved our goal. Thank you so much, Bill.
Okay.